In the heart of the Forbidden City, behind walls so high that the outside world seemed like a distant dream, existed a world both dazzling and terrifying. The Emperor's Harem. To outsiders, it looked like a paradise. Golden palaces, silken robes, endless feasts, and hundreds of beautiful women chosen to serve the Son of Heaven, the supreme ruler of the Middle Kingdom. But the truth was far darker. The harem was not a place of romance or luxury, but a gilded prison where intrigue, fear, and death lurked in every corner. Every young girl brought into the harem carried both dreams and nightmares in her heart. Families often offered their daughters, hoping to secure power, influence, or even a touch of imperial favor. But once inside the Crimson Gates, these women discovered the harsh reality. They no longer belonged to themselves. They became property of the emperor, bound by rules stricter than iron, and watched by an army of eunuchs whose loyalty was not to compassion, but to control. Life inside the harem was a game of survival. Hundreds of women competed for the fleeting attention of one man. Only a select few would ever see the emperor face to face. Those who succeeded might rise overnight to unimaginable power, becoming favored consorts or even empress. But those who failed often faded into obscurity, condemned to spend decades locked away in shadowy palaces. Their youth wasted, their names forgotten. The atmosphere was suffocating. Imagine waking every day not knowing whether you would be chosen for the emperor's bed, ignored for years, or accused of treason by jealous rivals. Whispers of poisonings, betrayals, and sudden disappearances filled the marble halls. The faint scent of incense mixed with the constant fear of death. And yet, beneath all the cruelty, the harem was the very heart of imperial politics. Behind the emperor's decisions stood the silent hands of these women. One favor, one smile, one whispered suggestion in the quiet of the night. Such things could determine the fate of ministers, generals, even entire provinces. The women of the harem were pawns in a dangerous game, but they could also become its most powerful players. To understand the imperial harem is to understand the hidden machinery of the Chinese Empire. It was not just a collection of concubines. It was a battlefield, fought not with swords, but with beauty, cunning, and ambition. And for those who dared to fight, the rewards could be dazzling. But the price of failure was often silence, disgrace, and death. This was the paradox of the harem, a place where women were imprisoned, yet could wield more influence than the highest-ranking officials. A place where dreams of glory were built on the bones of the forgotten. And in this labyrinth of jade corridors and silken drapes, the greatest battles of the dynasty were often fought not in open fields, but behind closed doors, in the emperor's private chambers. The story of the harem is not one of love, but of survival. And as we peel back the golden curtain, we discover the truth, that within the most splendid palaces of China, the lives of women were shaped by fear, rivalry, and an unending struggle for power. The imperial harem was not simply a collection of women. It was an institution governed by a strict code of rules. Every detail of a concubine's life, from the way she walked to the way she spoke, was dictated by ancient traditions and carefully monitored by eunuchs and senior attendants. Nothing was left to chance. The emperor's world demanded order, and inside the harem, order often meant control. The journey into this gilded cage began with the selection. Across the empire, officials searched for the most beautiful young women. Families dreamed of the honor, for even a distant relative chosen for the harem could elevate an entire clan. But what seemed like glory was, in truth, a gamble. Daughters were often taken without their consent, and once the gates closed behind them, they vanished from their families forever. Upon entering, each girl was stripped of her identity. Her name was replaced by a title, often a number or rank that signified her place in the hierarchy. From that moment, she ceased to exist as an individual. She became a consort, nothing more. Her past life, her childhood, her family. All of it was erased in favor of service to one man she might never even meet. The rules were suffocating. Women were forbidden to speak freely, to write letters, or to leave the palace grounds. Even their meals were carefully prepared and tasted, for fear of poisoning. A single misstep could lead to punishment, a harsh demotion, exile to a cold, empty palace, or worse, a silent death that no one outside the Forbidden City would ever know about. And yet, for those who obeyed, the illusion of power shimmered just out of reach. Every woman dreamed of catching the emperor's eye. If she succeeded, her fortune and her family's fortune could change overnight. Lavish gifts of silk, jade, and gold awaited the chosen ones. But for the hundreds who were not chosen, life became a slow, suffocating sentence of boredom and despair, with days blending into endless years. The hierarchy of the harem was a ladder almost impossible to climb. At the top was the empress, the official wife of the emperor, respected as the mother of the nation. Beneath her were ranks upon ranks of consorts, noble ladies and attendants, each vying for attention, each capable of both kindness and cruelty. Friendships were rare. Rivalries were constant. It is said that jealousy was the deadliest poison of the harem. Women sabotaged each other with rumors, false accusations, and sometimes actual poison hidden in cups of tea. The walls of the palace whispered with suspicion. To survive, a concubine needed not only beauty, but also intelligence and the ability to read the emperor's moods like scripture. But the cruelest truth of all was this. No matter how high a woman climbed, her fate always depended on one man. An emperor's favor was fleeting. A woman who was adored today could be forgotten tomorrow, replaced by someone younger, more charming, or politically advantageous. For many, the harem was a cage disguised as a palace. The silken robes and jeweled hairpins could not hide the reality. Every smile to the emperor was calculated, every glance from him a judgment. And while the world outside admired the beauty of the Forbidden City, within its walls, countless women lived lives of silent suffering, trapped in a system where obedience was survival, and survival was never guaranteed. The Imperial Harem was a world of endless beauty on the surface, but beneath its glittering robes and polished jade floors lay a battlefield. Here, the wars were not fought with swords and armies, but with whispers, alliances, and daggers carefully hidden behind painted smiles. Every concubine, no matter how low her rank, dreamed of rising higher. The emperor's affection was not only a matter of love, it was survival. A single night in his chambers could bring a lifetime of security, while his cold indifference could mean slow exile into irrelevance. But the competition for his favor was ruthless. Poison was one of the most infamous weapons of the harem. Servants were forced to taste every dish before the concubine could take a bite. Still, accidents happened. A teacup laced with subtle toxins could end a rival's life, and yet leave no trace of guilt. It was said that even the most innocent smile in the harem might conceal lethal intent. But intrigue was not limited to assassination attempts. The most powerful women of the harem wove webs of lies, manipulating not only each other but also the emperor himself. False accusations were a common tactic. A concubine might be accused of disloyalty, of plotting with outside nobles, or even of sorcery. In a world where proof was less important than suspicion, such claims often ended in tragic punishment. One of the most infamous stories tells of an ambitious concubine who forged alliances with palace eunuchs to spy on her rivals. She gained the emperor's favor by providing secret information about supposed conspiracies within the court. For a time, her star rose higher than anyone had imagined. But her downfall came when her lies grew too bold, and another consort revealed her schemes. Stripped of her title, she was cast into the cold palace. A dark, abandoned wing of the palace where forgotten women lived out their days in silence and misery. The cold palace itself became a symbol of fear. To be sent, there was not only a punishment but also an erasure from history. Women who had once worn the most exquisite silks ended their lives in rags, their names forbidden to be spoken again. For many concubines, the cold palace was more terrifying than death itself. At the same time, power struggles often extended far beyond the harem walls. The emperor's mother, the Empress Dowager, wielded enormous influence. She could make or break the fortunes of any woman in the harem. In some cases, she acted as a protector, shielding certain consorts from intrigue. In others, She became the architect of their downfall, ensuring that no rival threatened her authority. The intrigues sometimes spilled into the empire itself. A concubine who bore a son could secure not only her own future but also that of her family. The boy could one day become emperor. This transformed the harem into a political battlefield, where women and their allies among officials fought fiercely for succession rights. A single pregnancy could ignite a storm of jealousy and schemes, leading to miscarriages that were not always accidents. And yet, amid the fear and rivalry, some women managed to thrive. They became masters of charm, poetry, and wit, captivating the emperor not just with beauty but with intellect. Others formed quiet alliances, surviving by supporting one another rather than destroying each other. These rare friendships were fragile, but they offered a glimmer of humanity in a world otherwise dominated by cruelty. The harem's intrigues remind us of a truth that has echoed through history. Where power concentrates, conflict always follows. In the Forbidden City, battles were fought not with open violence but with silence, subtlety, and the ability to manipulate a single man whose favor could change destinies. For the women trapped within its walls, survival depended on playing a game where every move could be their last. Within the secretive chambers of the Forbidden City, some women rose above the shadows of fear and obscurity. Their names echoed through time, their stories etched into the chronicles of dynasties. These were the legendary figures of the harem, women whose beauty, intelligence, and ambition left marks that reshaped empires. One of the most famous was Zetian. Though she began as a low-ranking concubine in the court of Emperor Taizong during the Tang dynasty, her story would defy every expectation. After Taizong's death, she was sent to a Buddhist convent, as tradition dictated. Yet fate brought her back to the palace, this time as the consort of Emperor Gaozong. Through careful alliances, clever maneuvering, and undeniable charisma, Zetian climbed to the highest throne of all. She eventually declared herself the sole empress of China, the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor in her own right. Her reign was marked by ruthless decisions, but also by reforms that strengthened the empire. Zetian's story began in the harem, but it ended with a crown. Another figure was Empress Liu Ji of the Han Dynasty, remembered as one of the most feared women in Chinese history. As the wife of Emperor Gaozu, she wielded power with terrifying precision. After his death, she effectively controlled the empire as regent. Tales of her cruelty, such as the punishment of rival concubines, made her infamous, but they also highlighted the sheer influence a woman could achieve within the palace system. Her actions were brutal, but they ensured her dominance in a world that sought to erase her. Then there was young Guifei, celebrated as one of the four beauties of China. Her grace was said to be so overwhelming that flowers would bow in shame before her. She captivated Emperor Xuanzong of Tang, who adored her with unrivaled passion. But her influence became a source of resentment among officials and generals, especially during the turmoil of the Lushan rebellion. Accused of bringing disaster to the empire, Yang Guifei was tragically executed. Her death became a symbol of the fragile balance between love and political survival in the palace. The harem was also home to countless women whose names are less remembered but whose influence was no less profound. Some worked in the shadows, guiding emperors with wisdom and strategy. Others turned their quarters into schools of art and poetry, leaving behind collections that reveal the brilliance hidden within palace walls. For every famous name, there were dozens who contributed to the culture and politics of the empire in silence. What made these women unforgettable was not merely their beauty, but their ability to seize power in a system designed to silence them. Zetian broke every tradition to become an emperor. Liu Ji ruled with an iron hand long after her husband's death. Yang Guifei turned love into political force, though at a tragic cost. Each of them reminds us that the Imperial Harem was not only a place of rivalry and survival, but also a crucible of ambition where destinies were forged. These stories reveal a paradox. The same walls that confined the women of the harem also created a stage for greatness. In a society where women were expected to be silent, these figures carved their voices into history. They remind us that even in the most controlled and secretive corners of power, extraordinary individuals could rise, leaving behind legacies that shaped China for centuries to come. Behind the red walls of the Forbidden City, the Imperial Harem was not only a prison of rivalry, but also a crucible of culture. While politics and intrigue defined daily survival, the women of the harem shaped China in ways far beyond whispers and schemes. In their isolation, they became creators, patrons, and trendsetters, leaving a cultural legacy that rippled through the empire. Music and poetry flourished in the harem. Many concubines, before entering the palace, were chosen not only for beauty but also for talent. Some were skilled singers, others masters of the pipa or guqin, the traditional string instruments of China. Their performances were not simply entertainment. They were competitions for the emperor's heart. A haunting melody or a perfectly recited poem could elevate a woman above her rivals. Over time, these performances influenced court culture, turning the palace into a stage where art and politics intertwined. Poetry, especially, became a powerful tool. The harem produced collections of verses that reflected the inner lives of women trapped within golden cages. Some poems were filled with longing, dreams of freedom, glimpses of nature beyond the walls, or memories of families left behind. Others carried hidden messages of ambition, carefully cloaked in metaphors so as not to risk punishment. These works, though often anonymous, enriched Chinese literature, offering a rare window into the private emotions of imperial women. Fashion, too, was born in the harem. Concubines constantly competed to present themselves as more radiant than their rivals. This drive for distinction gave rise to new styles of silk robes, elaborate hair ornaments, and cosmetics. When an emperor's favored consort appeared in a particular shade of silk or with a unique hairstyle, the entire court soon imitated her. In this way, trends born in the secluded harem spread across the empire, shaping the aesthetics of entire dynasties. The influence extended to philosophy and religion. Many concubines sought solace in Buddhism or Taoism, turning their quarters into places of quiet devotion. They commissioned shrines, copied sacred texts, and invited monks and priests to the palace. Through their patronage, they helped sustain spiritual traditions that define Chinese identity. Some even used religion as a subtle political tool, gaining moral authority in the eyes of both the emperor and the public. Even architecture and interior design bore the mark of the harem. The layout of palaces, the placement of gardens, and the choice of decorative motifs often reflected the tastes of influential women. Lotus ponds, rock gardens, and murals depicting mythological tales transformed palace courtyards into sanctuaries of beauty. What began as personal preferences later influenced imperial projects across China. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the harem was its hidden voice in governance. Through art, poetry, and ritual, the women of the palace subtly shaped the cultural narrative of their time. They could not stand in the Senate or lead armies, but they could whisper ideas into the ears of emperors, inspire movements in fashion, or guide the empire's spiritual tone. In this way, their presence extended far beyond the walls that confined them. The harem was a paradox, a cage that suffocated its inhabitants, yet also a greenhouse of creativity. In their struggle to survive, concubines turned their limited freedoms into instruments of expression, leaving behind echoes that outlasted their names. While history often remembers them for scandals and rivalries, their quieter contributions in music, poetry, fashion, and faith remain an invisible thread woven through the grand tapestry of Chinese civilization. In the end, the women of the harem shaped not only the destiny of emperors but also the culture of a nation. Their voices, though muted in their own time, still resonate today in the beauty of Chinese art, the elegance of traditional clothing, and the verses of poetry that speak of longing, power, and survival behind palace walls. When the Forbidden City finally closed its gates on the Age of Emperors, the echoes of the harem did not vanish. Instead, they lingered, shaping the way China remembered its past. The Imperial Harem, with its silks, shadows, and secrets, became a symbol of both fascination and dread, a reminder of the hidden battles that defined dynasties. Historians who later wrote about the harems often portrayed them as places of decadence and corruption. They told stories of jealousies that toppled empires, of poisoned cups that ended dynasties, and of women whose ambitions ignited chaos across the realm. These accounts became part of the moral lessons of history, warnings about the dangers of unchecked power, indulgence, and desire. But the truth, as always, was more complex. For every tale of cruelty, there were stories of resilience. Many women who entered the harem against their will found ways to carve meaning into their lives. Some became patrons of the arts, leaving behind poetry and paintings that still survive. Others influenced imperial policy, guiding emperors in moments of crisis. The harem was not only a prison, it was also a stage where women, often silenced in the outside world, found ways to speak. The legacy of the harem also lived on in Chinese culture. Literature and opera retold the tragedies of famous concubines like young Guifei, turning them into archetypes of beauty, love, and sacrifice. Paintings depicted court ladies strolling among lotus ponds, their elegance frozen in brushstrokes. Even in modern times, the image of the imperial concubine remains iconic, both admired and pitted, celebrated and feared. What makes the harem story so enduring is its paradox. It was a world of unimaginable luxury, yet filled with despair. A place where women were silenced, yet where some of the most powerful voices in history emerged. A cage of gold, but still a cage. And while emperors came and went, it was often the women within the harem who shaped their legacies, for better or worse. As the dynasties fell and China entered new eras, the Forbidden City itself became a museum, its walls no longer filled with whispers, but with tourists' footsteps. Yet the memory of the harem still clings to its red gates. Visitors imagine the shadows of women in flowing silk, the quiet plucking of a guqin in the night, the echo of footsteps in marble corridors. The harem's history forces us to ask, what is power, and who truly wields it? Was it the emperor, whose authority stretched across millions? Or was it the women in his palace, whose smiles and tears could sway the destiny of nations? The answer may never be simple, but perhaps that is why the story continues to captivate us. In the end, the imperial harem stands as a mirror of the empire itself, beautiful, powerful, and haunted by secrets. It reminds us that history is not only written in battlefields and palaces of men, but also in the hidden chambers where women lived, suffered, dreamed, and sometimes triumphed. The Forbidden City may now be silent, but the stories of its harems still breathe. They remind us of ambition wrapped in silk, of power disguised as fragility, of a world where the greatest battles were fought not with armies, but with whispers. And as long as people seek the truth behind the red walls, the legacy of the imperial harem will never fade.